Now, let's move on. Because I talked about earlier, which I probably pissed off a lot of Democrats. Hear me out. It's not political. But I talked about how the street is warning their clients. When I say the street, that's the institutional firms, Bank of America's, JP Morgan, Goldman. They just happened over the past week that a Democratic sweep could provide lots of headwinds for the equity market. And I truly believe that's why the market's selling off so much. It's not because COVID cases are rising, because, again, when you look at the data, of course they're going to rise. They're rising in the states that haven't really opened up yet, mostly in the Midwest. You know, we saw the same thing happen in Texas and in Florida, and now we're not seeing those huge rates anymore. Coming down, death rate is down. This is expected. This should be expected. Again, I know what you're reading out there, and it's crazy, but this should be expected. And this should be priced into the markets. But what's not priced in is Biden wins. And now that we're getting closer and you're seeing these percentages, and everyone say, well, the polls were wrong last time. The Democrats know the polls were wrong last time as well. Okay, they're not going to let up like Hillary Clinton let up last year, where she decided not to go to Wisconsin and Michigan and thought Trump was crazy and laughing at him, right? And then she wound up, she just didn't work as hard. She didn't campaign as hard, especially the past final days. You could argue that with Biden, she'd be out a little bit more while Trump's going out, 3 events a day. But here's the difference. When you're looking at the facts, Biden wins. We're going to see lots of selling into the end of the year, given that capital gains taxes are going to rise considerably next year, right? That's what Biden said. He said this is going to happen. So talk about institutions looking to sell. Also, if we take away the stimulus of $6 trillion injected into our system, central government, and that's $6 trillion. It's like $9 trillion if you take Japan, if you take Asia, central governments, $6 trillion. $6 trillion is 30% of GDP. If we take that out of the market, we would be in a massive recession right now. 25% unemployment rate easily. And what do we have? Biden is running on raising taxes on people who make more than $400,000, right? Something that he said. Well, these are people who usually own businesses, provide jobs for people, and they're expected to be taxed over 60% if they live in New York and California, which is going to result in these people doing what? They're going to move to income tax-free states like Florida, Texas, Nevada, Washington. But what does it mean for people in California and New York if this happens? Well, how do you generate revenue as a state? Through taxes. Well, if you're taking the rich people out who provide the jobs, and all the jobs are going to go to Florida and Texas and Nevada, and again, there's about 7 or 8 states, I think, where taxes are much low, no income tax. How are they going to generate revenue? To make up that difference, they're going to have to raise taxes even further on those regular folks, right? Simple math. That's what's going to happen. And people are saying, whoa, wait a second. Plus, after the debate, or during the debate, Biden said, look, we need to take a more conservative approach on COVID. And I thought he won that part of the debate against Trump. But now that's being taken as rolling back. These are putting those restrictions in place again in terms of what businesses can open and at what capacity. Now, we already burned through a lot of the money. There is money on the sideline on the fiscal side. But we really need this stimulus to come out. And you're seeing it. There's a reason why MasterCard, Visa, you had a lot of companies come out, which is surprising, right? And MasterCard's numbers are bad, but which doesn't indicate the economy is really, rebounding sharply like everyone's saying. But when you're looking at these companies, they're not offering guidance still because they don't know what's going to happen because we don't get the stimulus. We're talking about $1.8 trillion. This market is going to get crushed, at least in the short term, until, we hopefully get a vaccine. And after going to Disney, I'm telling you, people aren't going to stand for this. They're not going to close their business again or business that they took decades to build when only 1% of the population is at risk of dying of catching COVID. You may say, well, Frank, okay, well, the stimulus is on the way. 1.8 trillion, at least, that's on the table right now. Maybe it's a little bit more than that. But it's going to take place once the election is over, which is going to support economy we need, right? And that's going to happen no matter who wins. But, do you think that this is a contested election? You have hundreds of lawyers on both sides. The case go to the Supreme Court because it's not just Florida. It's going to be close during the Gore-Bush election, right? That whole recount was Florida. You have Arizona, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Few thousand, 10,000 votes separated these states in the last election. It's going to be close. It's going to be recounts. And nobody in Congress during that time is going to be focused on the stimulus package. No way. Too much at stake. And let's say if Biden wins, I can see McConnell and Republicans being really pissed off and stubborn and saying, you know what? You guys took long. We had a deal on the table. You didn't want to take it or whatever. Well, we're not negotiating a new deal. I truly believe, this is my opinion, that we're not going to see a stimulus package until next year. And if that's the case, while you're closing the economies, while you're raising taxes, things that Biden said, that's why you're seeing, that's what I'm reading from these reports, saying, holy shit, you know what? This could be bad. This really could be bad for stocks, at least in the short term. At least in the short term. Still have low interest rates. The stimulus will come out. COVID's going to go away. Just a matter of time. In other words, we could see a major rollback in states across the country. And put new time restrictions on certain businesses, close them for a few more months, higher taxes on the way when we're in a recession, whether it's for rich people or not. Higher capital gains taxes, which is going to result in lots of institutional selling before those rates go higher next year. And no stimulus maybe for a few months. Now, that scenario, pretty common sense there, assuming that Biden wins and just taking what Biden is saying. But that wasn't priced into stocks 2 weeks ago when you think about it that way. The market's starting to price this scenario in now. It's not COVID. It's a Biden win. Now, I'm bringing in Daniel Creech, senior analyst at Curzio Research, who thinks I'm completely overreacting because he believes Trump is definitely going to win with absolutely no doubt.
What's happening, Frank?
So give us your take on it, because for me, when I'm looking at, I want to look at both sides this way I can prepare myself the right way to give you guys the best advice to make money in your portfolios. So I'm looking at the polls, but what are your thoughts?
Well, in short, I do. I feel the exact same way as I did in 2016. And I know that nobody knows that I called it in 2016 because I wasn't part of this. But I think there's a lot of similar factors here. And let me break this down. So the polls, and you're exactly right, and you got to follow the polls. You got to pay attention to the other side. But in 2016, they couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, there was polls showing Trump had less than a 10% chance of winning. Mm-hmm. Hillary was just going to wipe the floor and all that. And as you said, she quit campaigning. You could argue, and I understand that. I don't understand how the polls when you mess up that bad, and there is totally biased, and they're biased on both sides. So I'm not picking one or the other. But the polls were so bad and so wrong. And I would just argue this: when you look at those, you have to take it with a pound of salt, because the difference in 2016 to 2020 is hardly different at all. When I mean this, the polls were so wrong. The same people that are doing those same polls now, would you say that there is more or less hatred or bias towards Trump?
Of course, more on both sides, probably more hatred on both sides.
And I would agree with that. Yeah. Both sides, definitely. So that's one thing. So the polls are polls are really more to kind of influence stuff anyway. And hey, both sides, if you're voting for Trump or Biden, you ought to go out and vote. Don't let the polls deter you one way or the other. It's a great right to get out and vote. So I would say you can go exercise that. But the polls, I don't put much faith in those because they screwed up so bad. And again, the hatred and all that has only gotten out of hand. Number two is that in 2016, there is no way to argue that there is this, and Trump likes to refer to it as a silent majority. And that's basically the fear of people out there saying, hey, Frank, if I come and ask you who you're voting for, do you think there's more repercussion if you say, and I'm talking publicly on Twitter or whatever, if you say, oh, I'm voting for Trump, I love Trump, or if you say, oh, no, I love Biden, I want everybody to be happy.
No, I mean, a good example of this is, people would just, I love this. In my town, we had a bunch of people just holding up signs and honk if you like Biden or whatever, which is cool, which is awesome, right? It's patriotic, it's showing you your support. And then we had the same thing for Trump, honk if you support him, this and that. And I could tell you, if people have their kids in the car, they're not honking for Trump. I mean, what you see with the anger out there, people are, it doesn't make sense in terms of risk reward to say, hey, I'm voting for Trump right now. I mean, even my kids, if they we go through things, if it's Biden, there's a Trump or anything like that, I'm like, just don't wear anything political right now. It's pretty freaking crazy. I mean, there's a lot of hatred out there. So yeah, people aren't going to say what they're going to do. Absolutely.
So you have a huge, that was the way it was in 2016. I would argue there is no way that is not significantly increased over the last 4 years. And the reason I would say that is because why did Donald Trump win in the first place? Well, obviously, this is my opinion. I could be wrong, but people were tired of the status quo and people wanted an outsider to come and shake things up. Now, where I'm from, small town in the Midwest, every time you'd see the media going crazy about, Trump did this or Trump said that, Trump is a Russian agent. We have proof. How many times did you hear that on all this BS?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody would kind of giggle and be like, well, he's doing exactly what we sent him there to do. Go shake things up. So you have the outsider comes in, is victorious. You have a media that is just 4 years of pedal to the metal onslaught of this guy. They even impeached him. Okay, that was a good move. You know why that was a good move? Because they knew he was never going to leave office. But it was a good move because Trump, like every other politician, is an egomaniac. And what hurts your ego? Because even if you don't get reelected, you were already president once. But guess what? That little asterisk next to your name says you were impeached, and that has got to just piss him off.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't doubt that, but it was a good move by the Democrats politically. So you have it's got nothing but worse on the people that are more scared or just going to say screw it to them, and they're not going to admit who they're voting for. Now you have to look at what happened over the last 4 years. Now, obviously, this is pre-coronavirus, but you look at lower taxes for everybody. I'm not going to go as far as say it was the strongest economy in the history of the United States, but it was to the point where it was a lot better than the previous 4 years. We were at a situation to where if you wanted a job, you could go get a job. You could go out and make it on your own and work your way up the chain of ladder. And I think that's what a lot of people really want deep down. So you had a very good economy, a strong economy, easily the world's strongest economy. You had a good record-breaking stock market. Okay. So let's go back to 1992 before I paid attention to politics. James Carville. What do you think about when I say James Carville, who was whatever strategist, or he was with the Clinton campaign? But what's the first thing that comes to your mind, Frank, when I say James Carville?
Oh, I like him because I like him as a political analyst because he's Democrat, but he looks at both sides. But I mean, I know there was controversy early on about him, but
it's the economy, stupid. That's what I think about. It's the economy, stupid. That was his big, and it was brilliant, and he was right, and it worked. So now
but the economy is crap right now, right?
Right now because of the coronavirus. But who doesn't blame the economy on the coronavirus? I would say everybody blames the downturn on the economy.
Not everybody.
Well, not everybody, but I would say a lot of people have to admit it to themselves.
Yes.
And so now you have a situation where you said, okay, and there was a Gallup poll around the 9th of October that came out. And it was interesting because it had 56% of the people said they were better off 4 years than they were 4 years ago. Now, this is exciting because Trump, of course, went to Twitter and said, hey, even during a pandemic, you guys are better off. Okay. So you could take that out of context if you want, but it does come down to the economy. And I think the majority of people are going to say, hey, if the coronavirus didn't happen, which is a big if, obviously we have to live in reality, then the economy and the stock market, I think, would have been humming along just fine. And it's going to be very hard. And not to mention, it's very hard to unseat a sitting president anyway, just by the odds. And we're odds people, we're analysts. So I think those big tailwinds are why I think he wins in a landslide again. And I felt this way in 2016 because people are tired of the status quo. If you have an opinion that goes against the majority of the media, people are tired of hearing you're just a dumb redneck and you're a racist and you're a bigot and all that just because you support Trump. And I think there's a lot of that out there. So, yeah, as weird as it feels, because I know I'm kind of walking out on the limb and giving people the saw.
You're not, though.
But yeah, I think he does. I think he wins hands down. And I think the only way he loses is with the whole, ballots and all that. What can we count? Because I don't know if you talked about it today, but I think you have in the past, how some states wanted to try to let you count your vote after the election day.
Mm-hmm.
Some day, damn near up to a week afterwards.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's just beyond crookedness and fuckery, but whatever. Let's ignore that. But the only way I think he loses is if you have these lawsuits and basically fraud. And you know what happened on Monday with the Supreme Court? Well, there was a new person announced.
Yeah.
So now we have a new justice. Well, that's interesting. Now, don't flip out there, everybody, if you're upset about the 6-3, because it's not really 6-3 conservative, because Roberts isn't as conservative as what everybody makes him out to be. But they do have a majority. And of course, that's going to play in the favor of ballot testing and all that kind of stuff when it comes to voting. So, yeah, everybody at ease. Hopefully we can get through the coronavirus and move on with our lives. But yeah, that's my presidential election prediction.
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of Trump supporters and people, Ryan Zinke, who I spent time with in Wyoming, he's like, thinks he's going to win a landslide. I mean, a landslide. It's like, whoa. But if you, depending on what you're watching, right? I mean, if you listen to Trump speaking at a lot of these events, which is like 3 a day right now, he's going a little crazy. I mean, the people at these events is remarkable, right? I mean, the only thing you could say is some of them aren't wearing masks, but just the passion is unbelievable when you just see, people honking their horns and stuff, and 70 cars at Biden. It's so different, right? The excitement level. I feel like when Obama gave it his that speech right after he won. I mean, the faces of people, like they were crying, like the emotion behind it, like you got it, like holy cow, man, these people are really, really behind it.
Yeah, he definitely captured the moment. He inspired people, and he did a great job. And I think Trump is doing. I mean, you look at the crowd, you look at the enthusiasm. It's remarkable, and you got to give him credit on that. But yeah, I think it's the exact repeat as 2016. So. But hey, I could be dead wrong.
It is going to be interesting, but there are a lot of people that think that. I mean, you listen to Trump. I was saying he's saying, we're winning in this poll, winning this poll. All the polls say that he's not. So if you're watching, if you're Democrat, you're watching CNN. If you're Republican, probably watching Fox. If you're left, you're watching MSNBC. Who's really out there, man? I mean, that's pretty much very entertaining if you watch that, but it's crazy. But if you listen to CNN, it's over. They're definitely going to win. If you listen to Fox, it's Trump's going to win. But what does that mean? It means it's probably going to be contested, if I had to guess. We'll see what happens. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I do know it's only like 10,000 to 40,000 votes, which separated. We talk about a couple of counties here. When you look at a lot of these battleground states, North Carolina, Wisconsin, even Michigan. So it will be interesting to see. How the campaigning's doing, how the money's being spent, and it's something that's going to impact your portfolio. But like I said earlier, when it comes to Biden, it's just surprising. I know you're going to be pissed off saying that if you're a Democrat. I don't care. I don't care about your portfolio. That it's amazing how sentiment just switched on a dime. And on a dime, it's like 2 weeks. All the sell-side analysts, the institutions are like, whoa, if Biden wins, this is what's going to happen, because he said what was going to happen, especially during that debate when we finally heard his policies. People are like, whoa, you're raising taxes. We're in a recession. We might not get the stimulus done, which has nothing to do with Biden. It's going to have to do with both sides unless they control everything. But even if that's the case, it won't get done to January. That's a long time. That's a long time right now of money that we need, which was the only support for our system in terms of the reason why we're not in one of the biggest recessions since the Great Depression. Now, we do have some interesting stuff to get to in terms of earnings. But before that, we have today, Twitter, Google, Facebook on the Hill. I know you have some strong thoughts about this. It's entertainment, very entertaining. I mean, they're really going after them. But does this mean anything at all for these companies? I mean, let's talk from an investment perspective. I mean, this really means nothing, right?
No, it means you should buy them on pullback. What is Facebook down today? Facebook is roughly down 5% today. Google's down 5% roughly. Obviously, we're doing this on the fly, and the market's down 3% on the Dow, 3% on the S&P 500. Yeah, so most of you know, and Frank, I have right here. This is hilarious. So we get the Wall Street Journal here at Curzio Research, although we don't get it every day.
Depending on what time they wake up.
The Florida Mail does not go out every day,
yeah,
which is interesting. But anyway, so you get the Wall Street Journal, and it comes in the plastic bag. Well, I opened it up the other day, or one day last week, and it had a separate plastic bag in it with nothing but this. And I know you guys can't see it home here, but Frank, look at this beautiful ad that somebody took out in the Wall Street Journal. How much do you think this costs to take out in the Wall Street Journal?
A lot of money. I mean, basically, you open it up and it's bigger than 2 8 by 11.
And it's thick. So. It's not cheap paper. Yeah. And it's purple. It's a beautiful purple.
Like one side, the whole side of the Wall Street Journal when you open up fully.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful purple, and it's got white letters. And when you open it up, it says, "We support updated internet regulations." And you think, if your radar doesn't go off about screwery, then you need a new radar, because this is a Facebook ad. And why are they getting out in front of this? Because they're dragged on front of the Hill today, and they're talking about repealing Section 230, or whatever 230 is called. And 230 basically just gives a free go for, how do I say that, Frank? Facebook isn't liable, Google isn't liable, Twitter isn't liable for whatever the users post.
Yes.
So that's what's in the rules to protect them. Now, what's funny about this is that CNBC just ran an article, where was it? About how Twitter not Twitter, but Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft all upped their lobbying efforts in the third quarter. So Facebook outspent everybody else. They spent $4.9 million, which was up 1.5% from the previous quarter. So what does this mean? That means that, Frank, what's the market cap on Facebook off the top of your head?
off of the top of my head, I have to be
gazillions. It just shows you how
800
cheap you can buy favorites in Washington for. They donated $4.9 million during the quarter. I don't have the earnings right in front of me, but that's, to say that's a drop in the bucket on Facebook, that's hilarious.
I mean, it's just, the amount of money. Yeah, of course.
So everybody's up there. They're talking about how, hey, we support further regulations. And as an investor, if that makes you nervous, you need to dig deeper because, of course, they support further regulations because they want to be inside the room to help make these game plans and make these regulations. All this is political BS. The reason you have these hearings is for people to grandstand. Ted Cruz had a good takeaway line. I'm sure he'll put it on Twitter and try to get reelected by it. But I don't know which one he was yelling at, but he basically asked one of them,
I think it was.
Who the hell elected you?
Yeah, like
and they do. They have a lot of
press the story and just they were like, and they're saying that 200-year-old paper and founded by Alexander Hamilton, and they came out with basically a story that was backed by whatever. And again, if you're Democratic, you think it's all bullshit. If you're Republican, it's a smoking gun. But
hey, is this your October surprise? You think? Because the election's not till Tuesday. That is an eternity in politics, people. Do you think this is the October surprise on the Trump side? And what do you think is on the Biden side? Because there's got to be something coming up. Just like the Hollywood tapes in 2016 with Trump. That was the big drop before the vote. I mean, there's got to be something there, right?
Yeah. I mean, they tried the rape allegations again and stuff like that just recently. I don't know if you saw that with Trump, and that just fell through.
I saw he had to get a judge said he has to defend himself or something. So that's going to carry on.
So they threw that, see if it sticks. But that's the thing, even with the tapes that came out, which if you saw that interview, man, it really is freaking crazy. I mean, the guy isn't getting paid, right? The guy's not getting paid.
You're not talking about Hollywood tapes. You're talking about
I'm talking
Tony,
about I'm talking about the
Lewinsky or
the
whoever.
the Biden Sons tapes and everything. And just, I mean, that interview was kind of telling when I saw it. I was just like, this guy's not getting paid. He's like, it's to protect his family. Just he had no agenda, and it was just like, whoa. It was like, but again, nobody's going to care about it. But I think that's the bombshell where, here we got the tapes and we got the campaign manager saying, you're going to destroy us all if you come out with this, right? He has him on tape saying that. Again, no one's really going to care. I think everyone who's going to vote is going to vote the way they want to vote. I don't know what's going to come out on the other side with Trump because, I mean, you hit him with impeachment. I mean, he's a racist. He rapes women. You hit him with everything that you could possibly hit the guy with, unless you have something on secret tape or whatever like you had last time. But I don't know if any of that stuff is going to work the last week because we had, 60% of the votes already in?
I don't know about that number. I know it's over 60 or 70 million already voted.
Yeah.
I don't know what percentage that's going to equal out to be.
Yeah. I mean, and that might be, it's 60 million. I don't know the percentage, but it's much more than, as of, compared to last year, as of beating those totals from.
And the interesting thing is because now we have to ask ourselves, even if another October surprise happens, who's going to cover it and who's going to see it? And this brings us back to the hearing today with Facebook, Google, and Twitter. Well, the big takeaway here as an investor is that if you get a pullback in these stocks because you honestly think they're getting broken up, and we've talked about this before, you can buy them because even if the government breaks them up, economically, they're amazing, amazing companies. So I'm not taking away anything. I think they're biased. I just wish they'd be more. I just wish they'd be more honest. Say, hey, we lean Democrat. Screw you. They're a private company. They're publicly traded, but still. They're allowed to do that. I mean, they're allowed to censor people. There's nothing illegal about that. You can be pissed off, but there's nothing really wrong with that. It's ridiculous, but that's neither here nor there. But because even if they break them up, they're going to have to give them ownership, and basically they would turn them into royalty companies. So this is a great marketing thing. If you're a Trump guy and you can't stand Facebook and all them, put them in your portfolio and at least make money off the people you hate. And if you're a Democrat, hey, join your own and make money off them too. So use pulling backs as a chance to scale into these companies because they are amazingly run from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, they are. And they just, the numbers that you're going to see a lot of these companies reporting today, tomorrow. We saw Microsoft's numbers incredible. Yeah, they offered again, the guidance. That's what I want to talk to you about. I mentioned it earlier in switching to earnings season here because I agree with you. I mean, even when you broke up the major oil companies, you would be better off buying them. And it also solved it where it wasn't, a total monopoly. But I would disagree a little bit where there's nothing wrong with them suppressing people, but this is how these sites make their money, right? They're taking all the information that we are putting on their site and selling it to other people to make money through advertisers, and then you're choosing which people could say what they want, and it's not fair. It's not the same thing.
I totally agree with that.
That's what pisses me off. If either have your policy in place and make it fair, or don't make it fair, because you can't suppress the Post article without suppressing, I think, something with Trump's taxes, which were illegally obtained, right? I mean,
Right.
they were hidden. So, but yet they posted that and said, and yet they're like, well, the drive was hacked or whatever. You got to be consistent, and they're obviously not, and that's why you're seeing them on the Hill today, and they're going to get destroyed in terms of, grilled to death by Republicans and even some Democrats. But yeah, it's all a sideshow. It's all a real sideshow. But let's get to earnings season, because we're looking at companies report earnings, and even the companies that are reporting strong earnings with the whole market selling off right now. It's interesting to see. It's going to provide an opportunity, because long term I am bullish, guys. You know that, especially on small caps. The economy is going to open up. We're going to get a vaccine, I believe. But the next 2 months, when we see pullbacks, right, Daniel? I mean, you can go back 10 years. Our pullbacks don't happen like a recession from 2000 to 2003, where you just see a gradual, ugly market for years. They happen in 3 to 5 weeks, and you see a 20%, 25% decline. This is what happens. You go back, what was it, 2018? From the end of the year with tariffs, the market fell 20%. I think that was one of our first corrections since the credit crisis. I think one other one. But you're looking at these things happen quick. We're already down 10% in, it feels like, a week, maybe a little bit more. We can go down a lot more if we just have contested elections, some of the things that I mentioned. But it is going to provide an opportunity, I think, because there's certain companies that are reporting very strong earnings that are actually getting nailed right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great learning curve and learning moment for me, just because I'm younger on the investing side and in the business. But it really drives home of, you got to know why you own something. So we've had several portfolio holdings across Curzio Research Advisory, CRA, and Curzio Venture Opportunity, the CVO newsletters report, and several of them have been really positive. Well, that all sounds great until you go look at your screen the next day and they're down fucking 8%.
Yeah.
Well, that don't make you feel very good.
Yep.
And it's the baby getting caught up in the bathwater, as the old saying goes. So, a casino resort comes out with great news. They're down 7% today. Why? Because the overall market's down. So it really makes you have to have conviction and how to separate the mass up and down of the market to the individual. And yeah, right now it's tough to see a sea of red across your brokerage account. But like Frank says, there's opportunity out there, and this will pass. I mean, this election will be over one way or the other, no matter who wins. And it's a driving point home of, hey, if you think about your portfolio, just know, why do you have it? And on a day like today, when it's selling off, unrelated to the fundamentals, and we're going to see more fundamentals separate themselves from each other, both in stocks and in private companies all over the world, all over the country, as the economy either opens up more or shuts down, depending on what the regulators and powers that be say. But yeah, that's the driving home message. Just understand why. That'll help put you at ease, and it'll help make you make a lot better decisions on when to add more and when to take advantage of your watch list, because you see it selling off for unrelated reasons to the business.
Yeah, and my thesis on this was, hey, look, COVID's going to go away eventually, and we're going to see a recovery take place, economic recovery. So buy some of those names that got impacted most of COVID, which is travel, right? Airlines, you could buy hotels, casinos. I wouldn't be buying theaters now that I've seen some of the latest data on them, when people are more scared to go to theaters today than they were in May, which is unbelievable.
That was interesting.
That was interesting.
That shocked
right?
me.
Yeah, so it's but that was my thesis. But now I think it's changed, and I'm saying you're not used to seeing this change in the street sentiment so quickly, that if Biden gets elected, he is going to roll back a lot of this stuff. I mean, that's what he said. Listen, we got to have a conservative approach. You're going to see cases spike, which is, again, this is normal. They're happening in the Midwest, where they haven't really opened up yet. Now they're opened up a lot more. You see more people get out to the economy. You're not seeing these spikes in Florida and Texas, which had them already. So this is normal, and death rate is down. We understand, right? We went through all those statistics, whatever. You can believe what you ever want. If you hate statistics, and don't listen to me. But now I think that's where you're like, hey, if a Biden does win, and we do, like, that is not factored in. I wasn't factoring into that, my thesis. I thought this was all like smoke and mirrors, where it's just like, hey, we got to say the economy is horrible so we win the election. I really believe that he may dial back some of these restrictions. I'm telling you, it's going to result in riots in the streets. Going to result. I went to Disney World. There was so many arguments. People are sick of wearing masks that aren't sick, whether you agree with it or not, because they know the statistics now. They know 99% of the people are going to be okay outside the danger zone, and it's just pissing them off. And it's going to result in people going, all right, enough is enough, because you're looking at that cure where is that going to be worse? No, I mean, it is going to be worse when you look at hey, open up the economies. And we're going to see more deaths on the COVID side, but you're going to see more deaths with so many different things that we're seeing in depression, what we're seeing in suicide rates, what we're seeing in, when you're closing these schools and keeping people and keeping the economies closed and businesses, these people are getting crushed now and no stimulus coming. I'm telling you, that's my biggest fear right now, short-term fear. And earnings, I never thought I'd say this, Daniel, are pretty meaningless right now, right? I mean, it's really meaningless. Whatever they report, I mean, these
we're caught in the fog of political, and like you said, I mean, the election is coming down to basically opening or closing the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, you could dumb it down to that right now.
An interesting trend. Companies that reported so 2 quarters ago, they said, this was like in March, April. All right, we're not offering guidance. I get it. Then the next quarter, a lot of these companies said, hey, all right, we got to figure it out. We got a supply chain figure out. We're offering guidance. Now they're not offering guidance again. You would think at this stage it would be more clear, but they really don't know, because they don't know if we're going to see the country close down again, which we're seeing in Germany. They just came out with an announcement, and bars and everything announcing closures.
You see how they're selling that? What are they calling it? The lockdown light?
Is that what they call it? Lockdown light? Yeah. Try telling it to
like that makes you feel any better. Hey, you can't go to work, and but don't worry about us ruining your family and your paycheck. It'll be a light lockdown.
And guys, think about it this way too. Even at 75% capacity, 80%, which I think was a level that we were open in the U.S. if you take the average 75%ish, I would say 90% of businesses can't function at below 80%, right? I mean, I would think that would be the problem, unless you just have an incredible business with massive margins. But usually if you do, then you're going to have more competition and more people steal that to get, some of those profits. But you're looking at restaurants. How many restaurants can operate successfully at 80%? Well, they've been less than 80% since March, and now you're going to go into the next year with no stimulus coming, with possibly a few months held up. Think about that as an investor. It's going to provide lots of opportunities for you, but you need to protect yourself too, right? That's what we're here for, to tell you about the good times, the bad times, and throw everything out there. But Dave, really great stuff. I love your opinions on this. A lot of times they're much different than mine, so it's really cool. And it's probably going to result in a lot of people hating you and other people loving you, which you better get used to.
Tuesday night will be interesting. I'll either look really good or really bad.
Yeah, guaranteed Trump landslide. Trump in a landslide is a pretty bold call, but I've heard that a lot.
It was bold back in 2016 too, and that's exactly what happened with Hillary.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Or against Hillary.
Yeah.